Annie Levy. I'm joined by Masood Malik this evening, and it's a real honour to be here on behalf of my organisation, World Jewish Relief, and the Jewish community at this really special cross-communal event. Thank you so much to the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies, AISS, for bringing our communities together, and to St. John the Baptist Church for hosting us this evening. It's such a beautiful setting for us to gather in, I'm sure we all agree. So the Avicenna Peace Award honours distinguished individuals, institutions, initiatives and projects that advocate dialogue, intercultural exchange, mutual coexistence and non-violent approaches. The award is named after one of the world's most renowned scholars, Avicenna, whose life and work transcended cultural and geographic boundaries. And we'll be hearing some more about Avicenna later. But this year, the Avicenna Award for Intercultural Cooperation for Peace is being awarded to 4 non-governmental Jewish organisations to recognise the key roles that they played during the Afghanistan evacuations in 2021, which really demonstrate the principle of mutual coexistence, which really is what this award is all about. So welcome to everyone who's joining. Please have a seat. And just before we kick off, I've been asked to let you know that tonight's ceremony will be filmed and live broadcast through the AISS social media channels, and it will also be covered on some UK-based Afghan media. So if there is any concern, please find a member of the AISS team and we will assist and answer any questions about that. So I will now pass over for some welcoming remarks to Reverend Gareth Wardell. So thank you very much.
Good evening. As has just been said, my name is the Reverend Gareth Wardell and not the Reverend Dr. James Hurd, as it indicates in your programme. I'm actually the vicar or the parish priest of a neighbouring parish to here, the parish of St Clement and St James, and my colleague, the Reverend Dr. James Hurd, asked me to stand in for him at short notice at this event. And I think the reason that he asked me to do so is because I lived in Afghanistan for quite a number of years. It was my privilege to live there between 1992 and 1996, and then again for a brief period of several months doing consultancy work following the fall of the first Taliban regime. I spent time back there working for something called the Post-War Reconstruction and Development Unit, an academic institute that was based at the University of York. And so it was my privilege to go back and do some research there, particularly for the International Labour Organization, entitled Capitalizing on the Capacities of Afghan Women. That, as I say, was some 20-odd years ago. My memories of Afghanistan, even during times of great adversity, were of a country of extraordinary beauty and of extraordinary cultural diversity, and in which, as a foreigner, I was made to feel incredibly welcome, and despite all the unrest that was going on around us, I actually felt incredibly safe and welcomed in my local community. But I also remember it as a time when that diversity, that cultural diversity and welcome, was under threat as never before. I recall meeting one of the last Jewish families that was still resident in Afghanistan, living in Kabul, and having the privilege to visit the synagogue near Chicken Street in central Kabul at that time. It's been said to me that once you visit Afghanistan, you never fully leave. A part of yourself, of your heart, always remains there. And that's certainly been my experience following the tragic events of 2021 and the arrival of the second Taliban regime. My own parish, which, as I mentioned, is just neighbouring to here, is no stranger to tragedy. As those of you who live in this part of West London will know, my parish is the one that has situated within it Grenfell Tower. And so it's a parish that is also one of great diversity and yet has known sadness and tragedy. And so it was a great privilege for our parish primary school, the School of St Clement and St James, to welcome 27 Afghan refugee children, almost an entire class, but spread between different classes and different age groups, to our parish primary school in the autumn of 2021, following the evacuation from Kabul. I'm glad to say that most of them have been relocated to other parts of the country now. We still have 2 of them, I think, in the school, but we continue to remember and pray for them, those children, as they settle in different parts of the UK. So it's been my happy, if accidental, privilege to be invited tonight to say these opening words of welcome in place of my colleague. And I extend my warmest congratulations to the recipients of the Avicenna Peace Award tonight. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Gareth Wardell, for your excellent speech. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 4th round of the Avicenna Peace Award, organized by the Afghanistan Institute of Strategic Studies. Before I start, I'm honored to moderate today's event with my dear colleague, Annie. I would like to say welcome for all of you to the event. And now, I also invite Dr. Dawood Muradian, AISS Director General, to deliver his introductory remarks. Janab Dr. Said Befharmain.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies, I would like to extend our profound gratitude and thank you to all of you for accepting our invitation to attend the 4th Avicenna Peace Award in this house of worship, contemplation, and art. Last week was the 986th death anniversary of Avicenna, who reportedly died in June 1037. Last week was also Refugee Week here in the UK. And tonight we have gathered to celebrate thousands of individuals and organizations that help Afghan refugees, symbolized by the Jewish organization. Among many common features of the 3 Abrahamic religions is the fact that Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace upon them, were refugees. Avicenna was also a refugee who was forced to flee Balkh in northern Afghanistan because of political and religious persecution. So such a wonderful convergence of date, place, occasion, and personality devoted to refugees. Ladies and gentlemen, the decades-old conflict in and over Afghanistan has caused one of the world's largest refugees in modern time. Following the Taliban reimposition in August 2021, per the International Migration Organization data, 3.6 million Afghans were forced to leave the country between 21 and 22, or nearly 10% of the population. This is unprecedented. Usually war and conflict are associated with mass migration and displacement, but not a peace process, not a peace agreement. But in the case of the peace agreement with the Taliban, such a large-scale displacement was caused by that so-called peace agreement. Some of us here belong to this group of Afghan refugees that were forced to flee after Taliban's occupations. The scale of that displacement was matched by the global solidarity of individual organizations and governments across the world to provide assistance and supports. The mobilization was unique in terms of diversity, passion, creativity, and improvisation. Many rules were suspended or broken. Thousands of people, from senior official to retired four-star general to charity workers, were working day and night to find a way to a solution for their stranded Afghan friend, colleague, or just someone who needed to be saved from the Taliban. And I'm sure every one of those 3.6 million Afghan refugees has a story about a kind strangers who help him or her one way or the other. The prevalence of mankind's greed, hubris, and fear are well known to all of us. However, we must also recognize and celebrate our collective endowment of empathy, kindness, and compassion that have transcended all fault lines and barriers. And the global efforts to help stranded Afghans was the demonstration of the universal value of empathy and compassion. Tonight we are here to celebrate all those individuals and organizations and governments that joined these endeavors. I would like to conclude by thanking all friends and colleagues that helped organize tonight's event. Again, another example of collaboration and contribution. From the pastorship of the church for gracefully hosting us in this beautiful church, to our Jewish friends and colleagues who accepted our gesture of appreciation, to our esteemed speakers who traveled from Israel, United States, Slovakia to attend tonight's events, and to my colleagues at AISS, University of Sussex, Research England, and the National Endowment for Democracy for supporting AISS. And a special thank for Professor Ebadi, the distinguished lady, is the global symbol of resistance of the women of Afghanistan and Iran, who cut short her visit to the US. She just came back last night, especially for this evening, and she's coming back again tomorrow. So سپاسگزار سرکار خانم دکتر، شما بزرگواری کردین که دعوت ما رو پذیرفتین و زحمتی کشیدین که از آمریکا تشریف آوردین فقط به خاطری که بیاین صحبت‌های خودخور با ما در میان بذارین. سپاس فراوان. I wish all of you a pleasant evening and look forward to welcoming you, inshallah, in our future awards ceremony in liberated Kabul. As our Jewish brethren would say, next year in Jerusalem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Muradian. That was an excellent speech. But our next speaker is Ambassador Jawad. He is the former Ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to the US, the UK, and the Russian Federation. Ambassador Jawad will elaborate on the rich history of Afghanistan Jewish and their social, economic, and cultural contribution to Afghanistan.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Muradian, Professor Shirin Ebadi, many colleagues here that I see again by being back in London, and my dear friend Yotam, Paul Anticoni, and many other friends that I've been delighted to work with or to see him in person after a while here. I'm very, very grateful for the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies to provide this kind of wonderful forum for us to get together and celebrate a cause that came out of a misery in Afghanistan. We, and especially awarding actually some of the most accomplished people, some of the most giving people in the difficult time in Afghanistan for what they did to help Afghan refugees. It's an incredible step, and I really admire what you're doing, Dr. Muradian, as always. Some of our friends are here, many are not, who are part of this incredible operation to get Afghan refugees out of Afghanistan during a very difficult and troublesome time. One person that I do miss is Dana, actually, someone that who worked with IsraAid and devoted a lot of time and attention to get Afghans out. These people who worked by giving their time, their resources, their attention, their love, their care, are true heroes. We did our smaller part of providing actually passports from my embassy in Moscow to those who are evacuating, but many others actually gave, as I mentioned, timeless and precious efforts. They were following the movement of these young girls who are members of a cyclist team, the Afghan jurist, the Afghan legal professional, and there was nail-biting moments that were keeping people alive to follow actually every step of these groups to make sure that they cross border and achieve a safer destination. I'm sure that my dear friend Yotam Pulitzer, the CEO of IsraAid, will speak more in detail about the efforts. Dr. Muradian have asked me to focus more and talk about actually the history of Afghan Jewish community. An interesting actually area. I'll start actually with a meeting that took place in 1950. In 1950, the World Jewish Congress meet with our ambassador, UN representative, and the UN, Sardar Naim. Sardar Naim was our ambassador there, and they asked Sardar Naim, who was a cousin of the king, to petition King Zahir Shah to allow the Afghan Jewish community to leave Afghanistan. It was 1950, and in a matter of a month, in October of 1950, the very benevolent and mild king of Afghanistan allowed actually the Jewish community to travel. And Afghanistan was the only country that did not put a stipulation for them to give up their citizenship. They retained their Afghan citizenship, and a number of them choose to leave Afghanistan to migrate to Israel. And they left from Kabul via Herat to Iran and then onward to Israel. Some of the more wealthier families stayed in Kabul, and you mentioned, Pastor, actually the synagogue and Sahraa Karimi and some of these people went to school with me in Kabul French high school, Lycée Istiqlal, and they were still there, and they were part of the Afghan community, small in number, but they were part of the mosaic of the beautiful mosaic of the Afghan diversity of cultures and ethnicities that existed there. When they left, we lost another gemstone of that beautiful mosaic that Afghanistan was composed of. Different ethnicities, different linguistic group, different ethnic group. But they retained their love for Afghanistan. And it's very interesting, through the research that I did, I came across actually a collection of the poetries by Afghan Jews who were in Jerusalem and writing poetries in Farsi, talking about how much they miss Kabul and how much they miss Afghanistan. So that relationship actually was maintained and sustained. When I wrote actually my first article about 20 years plus ago about Afghan Jews, there was very limited resources. But that's not limited to a lack of resources about Jews. Unfortunately, in closed societies like Afghanistan, we have limited research done in other ethnic groups. In Afghanistan, we know very little about the Buddhists of Bamyan. We know very little about the Zoroastrian of Balkh, or even about the Ismailis of Badakhshan, because they are smaller minorities. But fortunately, this gap has been bridged gradually. We know more about the rich history of the Afghan Jewish community. And the history of the Afghan Jews is more a reflection of the kind of unraveling political history of Afghanistan than the other Jewish communities globally. They did well when Afghans did well. They suffered more when Afghans in Afghanistan suffered more, always throughout the history. But one thing is clear, except for a few exceptions, that history was a history of acceptance, that history of integration and tolerance. And in fact, some of the cities like Kabul, Herat, even Maymana. Maymana is one of the cities that historically was called also Yahudiya, it means the cities of Jews. And that was because the population was so heavy in Maymana. These cities occasionally served essentially as a refuge for the refugees coming from Iran during the Safavids or from Central Asia during other troubles. Not only that diversity is a historic fact, if you look at the incredible collection of black and white photos that's been recently published in Israel about the bar mitzvahs and then the weddings and then the events of the Afghan Jews, if you look at them, if you look at the turban and the green chapan of the rabbi, he looks like an Afghan notable. He looks more Afghan than a typical rabbi that you expect, actually. And the wedding rituals are very similar to the elaborate wedding ceremonies that we do have in Afghanistan. And that will be a short side discussion. I know some of my scholar friends are also here, so I would like to just mention this briefly, that another sign of tolerance that existed for the Jewish community and the Jewish faith in Afghanistan is that from the 16th century to the 20th century, many of the Afghan official historians claimed that Afghans, and particularly the Pashtuns, are a descendant of Bani Israel. This was a dominant actually theory that in many actually prominent historic books, if you look at Tabaqat al-Nasiri, there are many other books, I'm not gonna bother you with all of this, but it's just a number of the books that was reading from 1630 onward in the Mughal Empire, Jahangir area. They tried to connect the lineage of the Afghans to a Jewish heritage. Again, it's later on the DNA research and other proved this to be unfounded, that there's no reason to believe that this was fact, but it shows actually a kind of a sense of pride that people took by affiliating themselves to a Jewish heritage. Unfortunately, later on, during the 20th century, when Afghans starts going and being educated in Turkey and Germany, kind of a different theory took over, and Afghan start claiming that they are Aryan. So there's Afghan historian. The official historiography completely changed. Both of them are historically unfounded, but it shows actually the tendencies that exist in writing the official history of Afghanistan. I've written an article on how these two theories actually change and who are in charge of it. I'm not gonna go into detail into that, but I would love to discuss it for those who are interested. But now back to the Afghan Jewish community. They claimed actually that in their more or less oral history that they are actually the descendant of the Assyrian assault in Jerusalem in 1721. While it's quite possible that when that assault, which caused mass migration, some of the groups may have actually traveled eastward toward cities like Herat or Kabul and may have settled along the Silk Road, but still we need more credible evidence to establish that this is really the case, but it's not far-fetched from the reality. But the earliest records that exist, the written records that exist, are religious correspondences of Jews of Afghanistan, dates to 8th century. These documents affirm the existence of flourishing, actually, in prosperous Jewish communities in Ghazni, Balkh, Maymana, Kabul, Firuzkoh, Herat, and Marv. In Ghazni, this is also fully documented. About 8,000 Jews lived in Ghazni, which was a metropolitan city under Sultan Mahmud, and they operated also mines, which is kind of rather unusual occupation for the Jewish communities. But under the Sultan patronage, they were operating copper mines in Ghazni. In the 12th century, again, more documents exist that shows that 40 to 80,000 Jews were living actually in Kabul. and along the Silk Road in Herat and Maymana. And they were mostly actually involved in gemstone trading and karakul trading. And the way we know, they were taking these difficult trips going actually to Central Asia, to China and other. The evidence that we know that they were involved in that are some prayer that they wrote actually along the road on these mountain caves when we were afraid of cold and bandits and others. So there are some Hebrew prayers that they carved into the stone. That shows actually that a thrifting society of the Jewish traders that were traveling between Afghanistan and Central Asia. And furthermore, an interesting historic evidence that some tombstone actually found in Firozkoh, and I look at the name and the title, and especially the title of those who were deceased, the people who were dead actually in this tombstone. You have some elaborate title like teacher, trader, and mudarris and others. So that means someone who is teaching. It shows that this was an established society. It was not a small impoverished society, because only an established society with strong public social can afford to have institutions such as school. But the best ancient records of the Afghan Jews is the Afghan Geniza. That's the word Geniza is an Hebrew word, and it shows actually meaning the storage or a treasure where religious items or books are kept, because it's forbidding to throw away under the Jewish faith anything that has the name of God on it. So these Afghan Geniza provide an important, it is as important as the so-called Cairo Geniza. And the word the Geniza, as I mentioned, we have a similar word in Farsi, it's khazina. That's where you bury actually the documents or a treasure. The two words are also very similar. It has an incredible records of trade, commerce, asking for clarification on religious issues. It really shows a thrifting society that was involved in a variety of activities, and the writings are in Judo-Persian, and it proved the existence of a thrifting Jewish community in 10th century along the part of the Silk Road that traversed through Afghanistan. As I mentioned, the Afghan Jewish community did well when Afghanistan did well, and they suffered when Afghans suffered. So when Genghis Khan onslaught on Afghanistan took place, the Jewish community was disseminated, along with the other. There was a brief revival in 16th century when once again actually the Jewish traders started actually working on the commerce routes between Afghanistan, India, and the Persian Gulf. But however, by creation of steamboat and the sea routes, the ancient Silk Road was forgotten. And therefore, those traders who benefited from that trade, like many other Afghans, lost significance and wealth. And also during the rule of the Safavid in Iran, the Iranian court became very harsh on minorities, and particularly the Jews, and a number of Iranian Jews actually settled into Herat because they had a commercial relation with the Jews of Herat. And the number of the Jewish community in Herat reached once again 40,000. And again, I'm not going into detail, but I have actually some of these people who traveled from Mashhad to Herat have kept actually detailed records of their trip, and they write how happy they were once they arrived in Herat, and the city is welcoming to them. And I got another evidence of the doors being opened to the refugees and to those who wanted to settle. In 19th century, there was some civil war and problem in Afghanistan that affected actually the Jewish community. And some of the hardship that was imposed continued until the King Nader Shah in 1929. He reversed some of the decrees that was actually imposed by the government and gave actually full citizenship right and ownership rights to the Afghan Jewish community, and other communities, Hindu communities were also included in that. But the first wave of kind of pre-establishment and pre-authorized movement that in the 1950s that I mentioned at the beginning happened in 1944. Mostly younger Afghan Jews, also collectively with some younger Afghan, some Jews from Central Asia that escaped Russia, they made their way to India, hoping to go to Jerusalem. But they faced harsh, actually, treatment by British, and they were accused of being a communist and agent of Russia. There's a record of some of them committing suicide and other, but finally in 1949, that first wave of community of Afghan Jews made it into Jerusalem and settled actually in an area that's called the Bukhara quarter which is in Jerusalem, and it's mostly actually the Farsi-speaking Jews settled in the Bukhara quarter of Jerusalem. And they started actually establishing the foundation of the first Afghan Jewish community or Farsi-speaking Jewish community. The remaining Jewish community in 1960s and 1970s with the Soviet invasion, they started leaving Afghanistan. They settled in New York and here in London and also in Israel. Today there is 1,000 member community of Afghan Jews in Queens. I have had the delight of visiting them many times. I have very good friends among that community. They are still very much involved in Afghanistan and Afghan issues. They speak Farsi, and as I mentioned, their wedding ceremonies is pretty much the same as an Afghan wedding ceremony, and they keep their affiliation and love for Afghanistan. To conclude, it's just the history of Afghan Jews is a tale of remarkable tolerance in Afghanistan. With a few exceptions, when the entire country was going through trouble, that was a history of tolerance and acceptance. And now the Afghan Jews are a missing gem in this beautiful mosaic of Afghanistan. And especially we are hoping that to restore the diversity and tolerance that Afghanistan and Afghan desire, especially in the light of the present day misfortunes. Thank you very much, Dr. Muradian, and I would like to congratulate in advance all the recipients of the really remarkable Avicenna Award for Peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Syed, for your fascinating words and for reminding us how interconnected our communities really are historically. Whilst you were speaking, you reminded me of my own family, who are some of those Mashhadi Jews who actually found safe haven in Afghanistan when our community was being persecuted in Iran. So in a way, I have your community also to thank for my own safety, and it was really fascinating to hear and to learn more about our community's history, so thank you. And now, time for some music. We're going to hear from Professor John Haley. John is a former Professor of Ethnomusicology and head of the Afghanistan Music Institute at Goldsmiths, University of London. He's also a previous winner of the Avicenna Award. So welcome, John. Thank you.
سلام علیکم. با اجازه شما من یک نغمه از استاد محمد عمر بنوازم با اجازه شما. It's very hard to follow our dear friend Jawad with his excellent account of the very important presence of the Jewish community, but now we have the presence of another community, and that is the English ethnomusicologists. This is the Rabab, the national instrument of Afghanistan, a wonderful instrument, a very sophisticated instrument. I had the privilege of studying with the great Ustad Muhammad Omar 50 years ago. And this is a piece I'm sure I learned from him. my dear friend Suleiman from a later generation is going to try and help me with my performance. So. اجازه است؟ خیلی ممنون باشید.
Professor John, thank you so much. As you know, there are times there are times music communicates messages that we don't have words to describe. Thank you again. Thank you so much. And now, I'm pleased to invite Dr. Shirin Ebadi to deliver her keynote speech. Dr. Ebadi, no needs introduction. She is a well-known international figure, activist, and Nobel laureate. Also a lawyer by education. She won the Nobel Peace Prize for her pioneering efforts for democracy and women's, children's, and refugee rights. دکتر عبادی سپاسگزار از شما که جناب مرادیان گفت از حضور شما در این برنامه واقعا جای بس افتخار است. از روی بسیار دور آمده، خسته نباشید. لطفاً بفرمایید، همه منتظرن تا بشنون از شما. خوش آمدید.
عصر بخیر میگم خانم ها آقایان، خوش آمدید به این جلسه.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this wonderful event.
بسیار خوشحالم که توانستم بالاخره برنامه‌ام رو جور بکنم و در این مراسم پر افتخار شرکت بکنم.
I'm so happy that I managed to change my schedule and take part in this ceremony.
شرکت در این مراسم برای من خیلی اهمیت داشت از چند جهت. اول اینکه مسئله پناهندگانه.
It was very important for me to take part in this event. First of all, because it is to do with refugees.
میدونید که هیچ کس با رضا و رغبت وطنش رو رها نمی‌کنه. اگر کسی خونش رو، فامیلش رو، زنش رو، همه رو ول میکنه میاد، حتما یه دلیل محکمی داره.
We all know that nobody willingly leaves their homeland, abandons their family and their home to come to another country. So doing that, it's because they must have a very, very strong reason.
بسیاری از پناهنده ها دیگه تا آخر عمرشون نمیتونن برگردن و عزیزانی که جا موندن ببینن. این غم بزرگ رو فقط یک پناهنده میتونه بفهمه.
Now many of these refugees never manage to return to that homeland to see their dear ones, their loved ones that they left behind. This is a real sadness that only a refugee can understand.
هر وقت که یک تلفن یا ایمیل از کشور پناهنده میاد، میترسه مبادا خبر بدی داده باشن. یکی از بستگانش خدای نکرده بیمار باشه، فوت کرده باشه، جرأت نمی‌کنید فوراً اون رو بخونید.
Every time a refugee receives a telephone call or an email from their homeland, they are worried lest it contains bad news about their loved ones, and they're too scared to read it.
در حقیقت پناهنده و خانواده‌اش که جا موندن مثل یک رودخانه خطرناکی است که پرش شکسته، یکی این ور روده یکی اون ور رود، با حسرت هر دو طرف دارن به هم نگاه میکنن.
In fact, a refugee and the family and the loved ones he or she is left behind, it's like a river that used to be connected with a bridge, and the bridge has been cut in halves and they cannot reach each other.
پذیرایی از پناهندگان و کمک به اونها که آلامشون رو تسکین بدن واقعا یه وظیفه انسانیه.
Now, it's a human duty of each and every one of us to help alleviate the pain and the sadness of these refugees by hosting them and by helping them.
و من متاسفم بگم در قرن 21 خیلی از سیاستمداران و حتی مردم هستن که چشمشون رو روی این رنج ها میبندن.
And I'm very sorry to say that unfortunately in the 21st century there are many politicians and even ordinary people who turn a blind eye to the plight of these refugees.
من تبریک میگم به برندگان جایزه پر افتخار ابن سینا که به وظیفه انسانی خودشون به خوبی عمل کردن.
I would like to congratulate the past recipients and the recipient of the Ibn Sina Award for having done humanitarian work.
طی سالهای گذشته بیش از 1000 نفر رو کمک کردن که از افغانستان خارج بشن و در کشورهای دیگر به امنیت برسن.
I'd like to thank all those who hosted and helped thousands of Afghan refugees in the past year to come and find security in their respective countries.
اهمیت دیگر این جلسه برای من این است که یه عده مسلمان در یک کلیسای مسیحی دارن جایزه میدن به گروه‌های یهودی.
I am also very glad, and it's very important to me to be in a church where there are Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and there is going to be an award given to a recipient of Ibn Sina.
ترکیب این جلسه برای من خیلی با اهمیت، یعنی یه چیزی رو نشون میده خدا همه ما رو یکسان آفرید و همه انسان‌ها رو به یک چشم نگاه میکنه. اینکه دین و یا ملیت باعث بشه ما با هم اختلاف پیدا کنیم، دعوا بکنیم، واقعا بزرگترین اشتباهه.
The diversity of people here really impresses me. And I always think it's a big mistake, it's a real shame that religion or nationality causes so much division amongst us.
آقای سفیر قبل از من سخنان خیلی خوبی و کاملی گفتن، شرح دادن راجع به رابطه افغانستان با یهودیان و یهودیانی که در اونجا زندگی میکردن.
I was equally impressed by the beautiful speech given by Mr. Ambassador before me, and giving us a very comprehensive history of the Jewish community in Afghanistan.
و من میخوام به عنوان یک ایرانی حالا رابطه ایران و افغانستان، ایرانی ها و افغانی ها رو به شما بگم.
Now, as an Iranian, I would like to say a few words about the relationship between Iranians and Afghans.
میدونید به زبان فارسی، یعنی همون زبانی که من الان دارم حرف میزنم، زبان افغان، ایران و تاجیکستانه.
As you know, the language Farsi, which is the language I'm speaking now, it's also spoken in Afghanistan and in Tajikistan, Central Asia.
ما سه کشور فرهنگمون خیلی به هم نزدیکه.
Now the cultures of these three Farsi-speaking countries is very close.
و در قرنهای قبل که مرزها اینطوری خط کشی نشده بود، ما همه یک ملت بودیم.
Centuries ago, we were all one nation before they started drawing lines and creating borders and dividing.
و مفاخر ما بزرگان ما همه با هم مشترک بودیم.
And we all have great people in common.
به عنوان مثال ابن سینا که جایزش رو الان دوستان افغان من میدهند، این آرامگاهش در همدان در ایران، شهری که من درش به دنیا آمدم.
For instance, one of them is Avicenna Ibn Sina, as we call him, who was buried in Hamadan, which is the city where I was born.
یا رومی، جلال الدین رومی در بلخ به دنیا آمد. تمام اشعارش فارسیه و در بیشترین مدت عمرش هم در ایران، در قسمت الان قسمت شرق غربی ایران میشه زندگی کرد که با شمس تبریزی هم در اونجا آشنا شد و در کشور دیگری یعنی در ترکیه دفن شده.
Or Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi, who was also born in Iran, and he located to West Iran, where he met another great personality, Shams Tabrizi, who eventually fled and died in Turkey.
مثال‌های زیادی میتونم بزنم که نشون بدم ما چقدر از جهت فرهنگی به هم نزدیکیم.
Now I can give you many examples to demonstrate how close we are culturally.
و متاسفانه سیاست بود که باعث شد من الان اینجا به عنوان یک ایرانی از افغان‌ها معذرت.
And it was all because of politics. And that is why now, as an Iranian, I am here and I would like to apologize to the Afghans.
منظور من رفتار ناپسندی است که جمهوری اسلامی با افغان‌هایی کرد که در ایران آمدن پناهنده شدند.
Now, by apologizing, I am referring to the mistreatment of the Afghans who came to Iran and were treated very badly by the regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
این سابقه برمیگرده تقریباً به 1979-1980 که به خاطر جنگ‌هایی که در طالبان بود تعداد زیادی حدود 5 میلیون به ایران 5 میلیون افغان آمدن به ایران.
And much of that immigration took place in 1979-1980 after we had the Islamic Revolution, and because of the civil wars in Afghanistan, that many of these Afghans took sanctuary in Iran.
در اون موقع تازه جمهوری اسلامی تأسیس شده بود و ضمناً صدام حسین هم به ایران حمله کرد که منجر به 8 سال جنگ بین ایران و عراق شد.
Now, that was when the Islamic Republic had just been established, and at the same time, Saddam Hussein of Iraq had just attacked Iran, and which started an 8-year war.
برای دفاع از ایران حکومت جوانها، کارگران کارخانه، مردای جوان همه رو اعزام کرد به جبهه‌های جنگ.
To defend the country, this Iranian government sent a lot of young men, factory workers, students, youth to the war front.
برای پر کردن خلأ کارگران و مهندسینی که رفته بودن جبهه احتیاج به نیروی انسانی بود و خمینی گفتش که اسلام مرز نداره، هر کس که میاد فوراً راش بدید.
Now, because there'd suddenly been a vacuum, all the men had gone to the front to fight. There was need for manpower in Iran, so Khomeini said, Islam knows no borders, so let's open the borders and not allow anyone in.
که گفتم حدود 5 میلیون افغان آمدن به ایران.
So some 5 million Afghans came to Iran.
اما اتفاق بعدی که افتاد این بود که فقط به تعداد خیلی محدودی اینا کارت دادن و بقیه رو گفتن خب ما کاری نداریم بیاین تو ایران زندگی کنید.
But what happened is that very few of these Afghans were given identification papers, but they were allowed to come and work in the country.
تا زمانی که جنگ بود با افغان‌ها در ایران کاری نداشتن، میذاشتن زندگی بکنن، اما اینا غیر قانونی بودن و چون غیر قانونی بودن نمیتونستن حساب باز بکنن در بانک، نمیتونستن بچه هاشون مدرسه بره، اگر ازدواج میکردن ازدواجشون رو ثبت نمیکردن و بسیار شرایط بدی داشتن. بعد از اینکه یعنی در حقیقت اینها تبدیل شدن به کارگران ارزان قیمتی که احتیاجات ایران رو داشتن برطرف میکردن.
So the regime just used them as some kind of cheap labor to help the country.
و بعد از اینکه جنگ تموم شد و از جبهه ها برگشتن ایرانی ها، اون وقت حکومت در صدد این برآمد که اینا رو حتی اخراج بکنه.
And when the war was over, when the Iranian men returned to their homes, the regime even decided to expel and deport many of these Afghans.
الان طبق آمارهای غیر رسمی حدود 3 میلیون افغان در ایران زندگی میکنن.
Now, based on unofficial statistics, there are some 3 million Afghans in Iran at present.
علت که من میگم آمار غیر رسمی بلکه هیچ وقت حکومت حاضر نشد بگه چند تا افغان هستن، کجا زندگی میکنن، شرایطشون چیه، همش سعی کرد چشمشو ببنده روی افغان ها.
When I say unofficial statistics, it's because the government has always refused to give the correct figure number of Afghans who are in Iran because it is turning a blind eye to the conditions and the predicament of these Afghans in the country.
خیلی از روشنفکرای ایرانی سعی کردن که اعتراض میکردن و سعی میکردن که حکومت رو قانع بکنن که به اینا کارت اقامت بدید که اینا بتونن اقلن قانونی زندگی کنن.
Many progressive Iranians urged the government to give proper IDs to these Afghans or residence permits so at least they can live in the country legally.
و البته قبول نکردن و مسئله خطرناک، مسئله بدتر این بود که چون اجازه درس خوندن این بچه‌های افغان نداشتن، یه نسل بی سواد داشتن بار می آمدن.
And what's even more tragic is because a lot of Afghan children, parents did not have IDs, could not attend school. There was a generation of Afghan children who could not receive an education.
تعدادی از افغان‌های تحصیل کرده که این شرایط رو دیدن سعی کردن که خودشون توی کامیونیتی هایی که دارن کلاس های رو ترتیب بدن و به بچه ها خوندن و نوشتن یاد بدن، اما اینا تعدادشون کم بود.
There were highly educated Afghans who tried to set up schools, makeshift schools for these Afghan children to teach them so they'll be literate, but there were very few in number.
اون زمان که من در ایران بودم یک انجیوی داشتیم به نام انجمن حمایت از حقوق کودکان. در این انجیو من سعی کردم که برای بچهای افغان کاری بکنم.
In those days, I had an NGO in Iran. My NGO was in support of children and the rights of the children. And through my NGO, I did my utmost to help the Afghan children.
ما روزهای جمعه در یکی از پارک‌های جنوب تهران این بچه‌ها رو جمع می‌کردیم و برای اینکه تشویق بشن که بیان، هر کس که می‌آمد بهش یه شیشه شیر و یه دونه شیرینی میدادیم، میگفتیم بیاین اینجا اینا رو از ما بگیرید و بعد این سعی به این بچه‌ها خوندن و نوشتن فارسی یاد دادیم.
For instance, every Friday we'd invite Afghan children to a park in South Tehran, and to encourage these children to turn up, we'd give them milk and cookies, and once there, we would teach them Farsi.
بیش از 1000 نفر رو ما آموزش دادیم.
And we managed to teach over 1,000.
اما آموزشی که ما میتونستیم در پارک و اونم روزهای جمعه بدیم بیشتر از خوندن و نوشتن نبود.
But the education we could provide only on a Friday and only for a couple of hours was only sufficient for reading and writing.
ضمن اینکه تعداد بچه‌هایی که نیازمند بود، یعنی باید درس می‌خوندن، خیلی بیشتر از اینا بود و بقیه رو کاری نمیتونستیم بکنیم.
Not to mention the fact that there were many children and we couldn't help them all.
به همین دلیل تعدادی از افغان‌هایی که در ایران بودند خودشون یا بچه‌هاشون که دیگه داشتن بزرگ می‌شدن، اونا از طریق ترکیه سعی کردن که به کشورهای دیگه برن و در اونجا پناهنده بشن.
So because of this dire situation, many Afghans decided to take their children and via Turkey and whatever route they could find, flee to other countries.
من یکی از رشته‌های فعالیتم پناهجوییه و در این ارتباط کمپ‌های زیادی برای پناهجوها در ترکیه و اردن و لبنان رفتم.
Now, because one of the fields of my activity is to deal with asylum seekers, I have visited refugee camps in Turkey and in Lebanon, and other camps as well.
و توی قالب این کمپ ها افغان ها هم بودند و وقتی من رو می‌دیدن گله می‌کردن از اینکه ما در ایران رفتار خوبی ندیدیم.
And many of these camps that I visited, they also contained Afghan refugees, and I remember many of them would come to me and complain about the maltreatment they received at the hands of the Iranian government.
و من تنها چیزی که میتونستم بگم شما حق دارید و من به عنوان یه ایرانی معذرت میخوام، اما بدانید که رفتاری که حکومت کرده با خود ایرانی ها هم بهتر از این نیست.
And all I could say to them was, yes, I agree with you and I am very sorry, and as an Iranian I sincerely apologize, but please bear in mind that this current regime has not treated even its own citizens in a better way.
وقتی که طالبان برای بار دوم بر افغانستان غلبه کرد، یکی از اولین کشورهایی که با طالبان رابطه داشت ایران بود.
Once the Taliban yet again took over Afghanistan, one of the first countries that decided to forge relations with the Taliban was Iran.
از جمله سفارت افغانستان رو خیلی راحت تحویل نماینده طالبان دادن، در حالی که میدونیم طالبان نماینده مردم افغانستان نیست، اینها با زور و با اسلحه آمدن.
For instance, they handed over the Afghan embassy to the Taliban envoy whereas we know that the Taliban envoy is not a real representative of the Afghan people and they took over Afghanistan by force.
من بیش از این وقت شما رو نمیگیرم چون میدونم خسته میشید، اما و در انتها آرزو میکنم که هر پناهجویی به کشورش برگرده، کشورش امن باشه که بتونه برگرده.
I don't want to take up more of your time, but I would like to say in conclusion that I really wish that all refugees one day manage to return to their homelands and live in security.
و همچنین آرزو میکنم ایران و افغانستان هر دوتا حکومت‌هایی رو داشته باشند که سزاوار فرهنگ بالای اونهاست، نه این جمهوری اسلامی و طالبان.
And I also hope that one day both Afghanistan and Iran will have governments at the helm that are worthy of their highly cultured and educated people, not the Taliban and not the Islamic regime in Iran.
شب خوشی رو برای شما آرزو می‌کنم.
I wish you all a very good evening.
شب خوشی رو برای شما آرزو میکنم. مجددا تبریک میگم به برندگان این جایزه و خداحافظی میکنم با شما.
Once again, I'd like to congratulate in advance the recipient of this award this evening and wish you all a pleasant evening. Goodbye.
We are now going to move on to Dr. Sahraa Karimi. Sahraa is a trailblazing film director and teacher, and she's currently based in Rome at the Experimental Cinematography Center as a visiting professor. She's going to share her insights into the collapse of Afghanistan and its human and cultural consequences. Welcome.
Good evening. It is very difficult to speak in English with very strong Eastern European accent, but live in Italy, and it is so complicated. But it is more difficult when you are in London and in English-speaking countries. So I apologize for my accent. It is a mix of Italian, Slovakian, Czech, and everything, but not English at all. But I try my best. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends, and countrymates. I'm sure that you are familiar with world history, and especially with the history of the Second World War, which took place in Europe between 1939 and 1945. Considering all losses and devastations that this war caused in various countries, the greatest catastrophe is the Holocaust. The forced migration and murder of Jews who were citizens of European cities. During the World War II, more than 6 million Jews were forced to leave their home, go into exile, and were murdered. 6 million is not a small number. 6 million means 6 million lives, desires, dreams, talents, abilities. 6 million human beings. In the years following World War II, many works in film, literature, poetry, painting, photography, and other formats were created to show the terrible tragedy of mass murder and forced migration of European Jewish people from different angles and perspectives. With this brief reference to history and the forced migration of European Jews due to decision of those in power at the time, especially Hitler's order, which destroyed the lives of millions of innocent people with his deeply fascist and racist views and ideological misconceptions because they had religious, racial, and cultural differences with Jewish people. I would like to make an indirect connection to the forced migration, displacement, and murder of thousands of Afghans that took place on August 15 and after that, with the return of the Taliban. This terrorist group, these suicide bombers, this fascist, narrow-minded regime, even though the catastrophe of Holocaust is far more painful and brutal, I can say with confidence that common experience of the Afghan people on August 15 with the Jewish people in World War II is the forced migration, forced exile, and abandonment of their homeland. Imagine starting a normal hot summer day. In the morning, before going to your office as usual, you smile at yourself in the mirror and wish yourself a successful new day. But in the middle of the day, you have to run through streets to get home because the Taliban, the people's constant nightmare, have invaded the city. On August 15, thousands of people, young and old, men and women, face a very difficult decision as Kabul, Afghanistan, and the Republic fell. The difficult choice between staying or leaving. And they didn't have much time to make that decision. In the past 20 years before the fall of Afghanistan, life wasn't easy for many of us, especially for my generation, because we were different, and society hardly accepted our presence and existence. We differed in our world view and philosophy of life. Either we belonged to ethnic minorities who were systematically marginalized throughout history, or we were women, educated, independent, capable, living in a traditional society, a very patriarchal and male-dominated Afghanistan, and facing thousands of restrictions. Or we were intellectually and academically at the level where we challenge many of dogmatic and backward thoughts of society and the wrong policies of our governments with valid arguments and references. Or we were artists, cultural workers, who work to keep alive our culture, our mother tongue, our authentic custom of ethnic minorities. Or we were a scholar and rejected the political religion. We rejected political Islam. Or we stood for human rights, women's rights, children's rights, and even animal rights. Or we belong to minority LGBTQ people in Afghanistan who have always been oppressed and condemned by the society. We were thousands of people with these differences, but we lived in Afghanistan. But on August 15, 2021, we had to choose forced migration and leave our home and homeland. On August 15, a dynamic, educated, and talented generation was forced to leave Afghanistan. A generation that was the main force for change, development, and growth in Afghan society. The generation that grew up in the past 20 years, many of whom were migrants, but returned to Afghanistan in large numbers to share in Afghanistan prosperity and freedom. They got involved in all fields, be it political, economic, social, cultural, or artistic, so that Afghanistan could stand on its own feet, so that Afghanistan, a country with a rich culture and history, could establish its cultural, political, economic identity among other countries of the world. Our generation was a generation that wanted to create a new narrative of Afghanistan, a narrative beyond a country dominated by war and terrorism. The new narrative that promised construction, dynamism, hope, and progress. But then August 15 happened. And Afghanistan and all democratic and human values, all important cultural, economic, and political achievement and beliefs collapsed. All our dreams, our hopes for better Afghanistan, our plans for better future collapsed in front of our eyes. Everything was destroyed, and the terrorist and barbaric group, the Taliban, came back to power, who were and who are the prophets of destruction, and at the same time, the causes of Afghanistan backwardness and misery. I wonder, when history repeats itself, and a backward group comes back to power, who in the first period of the rules achieved nothing for the country except darkness and misery, and who in 20 years massacred thousands of innocent people, young and old, women and men, children and newborn babies, in the suicides, attacks and explosions in the name of the religious beliefs and ideology. The group who completely removed the women of Afghanistan from society and imprisoned them in the corners of their homes. When you are faced with the return of this group and you know full well that your existence is poison to them and their existence is poison to you, when you know that living under their dogma, rule, and dictatorship is your gradual death, what choice do you make? And many people in Afghanistan decided to leave Afghanistan on that Black Sunday, and in the days that followed, and they are still looking for a way to leave. Our departure, the departure of educated and dynamic generation of Afghanistan, was the departure of democratic thoughts and values from Afghanistan. Many people came to the airport in despair because they had no choice but to leave. And today, Afghanistan is empty. Empty of music, film, art, writers, filmmakers, artists, cultural workers, active women and girls, empty of hope, laughter, and happiness. Empty of thoughtful generation that should have stayed in Afghanistan. But the return of a terrorist group, the Taliban, forced them to leave their homeland and accept forced exile. Those who remained in Afghanistan are sad and depressed. Instead of dreaming of a better future, they think of killing themselves and ending their lives. They are deeply hopeless. Thousands of women and girls are forcibly married, not allowed to go to school or college or university, not allowed to work, and not even allowed to have valuable life they deserve. They suffer from depression and dark thoughts of no longer existing in this world. This is just a small part of consequences of the collapse of Afghanistan on August 15, 2021. I could talk for hours about what we have lost and how hard it is to regain them. I can say that it is impossible to get back some of those losses. They are lost. They are dead forever. Today, if many people who were displaced and wandered in Kabul airport on August 15 and in following days have survived and have the opportunity to live on and find new hope even in exile, it is only thanks to the help of humanity and the help of organizations, people, and individuals who decided to save this displaced generation far from afar, without any religious or racial judgments, and only with beliefs in humanity. These people owe their lives and their future to you, to those who helped them. And we thank you. And we thank you for your humanity. Humanity always wins. Humanity is the only hope to survive and continue this life. Thank you.
Dr. Sahraa Karimi, for sharing that with us. I think we feel your pain so acutely, and we also hear such a resilience and determination that comes from a love and pride in your people and your country, and we really appreciate you sharing all of that with us this evening. So we will now watch a short video about the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies and about this year's award.
The Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies, AISS, was established in October 2012 and has since become a premier research institution in Afghanistan. It aims to create an intellectual space for addressing strategic issues pertaining to Afghanistan, the wider regional and international context. The AISS opened its UK offices after the collapse of Afghanistan. Since its relocation to the UK, AISS has been able to resume its activities. AISS UK was established within the University of Sussex with the logistical, academic and intellectual support of the University, Research England and the National Endowment of Democracy, the NED, in order to continue its activities. Abu Ali al-Hussein ibn Sina is better known in Europe by the Latinized name Avicenna. He is the most prominent philosopher in the Islamic tradition and arguably the most influential philosopher of the pre-modern era. Born in Afshana near Bukhara in Central Asia in about 980, he is best known as a polymath. As a physician whose major work, the Canon al-Qanun fil Tib, continued to be taught as a medical textbook in Europe and in the Islamic world until the early modern period, and as a philosopher whose major summa, the Cure, al-Shifa, had a decisive impact upon European scholasticism. He articulated a development in the philosophical enterprise in classical Islam away from the apologetic concerns for establishing the relationship between religion and philosophy towards an attempt to make philosophical sense of key religion doctrines and even analyze and interpret the Quran. Late 20th century studies have attempted to locate him with the Aristotelian and Neoplatonic traditions. Apart from philosophy, Avicenna's other contributes lie in the field of medicine, the natural sciences, musical theory, and mathematics. Avicenna Peace Award, Intercultural Cooperation for Peace. In line with AISS's core objective of promoting understanding and cooperation through dialogue, Afghanistan's first international award, initiated by AISS, honors distinguished individuals, institutions, initiatives, and projects advocating dialogue, intercultural exchange, multi-coexistence, and non-violent approaches. The award is named after one of the world's renowned scholars, Avicenna, whose life and work transcended cultural and geographical boundaries. The first winner of the Avicenna Peace Award was Professor Michael Barry, a well-known international scholar in the field of Islamic art and civilization, and former professor at the American University of Afghanistan. The second award was awarded to Rashid Al-Ghannouchi, a Tunisian politician and thinker, co-founder, and intellectual leader of the Ennahda Party, while the third Avicenna Award was awarded to Senator Dr. Anarkali Honoria, a Sikh Afghan politician for the promotion of tolerance and non-violence. This year's winners are Jewish non-governmental organizations for their important role in establishing humanitarian corridors for the safe evacuation of those at risk during the 2021 Afghanistan evacuation, alongside organizations working with local communities, charitable organizations, and other groups that assisted in the resettlement of Afghan refugees around the world.
Hello, I'm Paul Anticoni, Chief Executive of World Jewish Relief. World Jewish Relief, inspired by its Jewish values, seeks to support, save and empower those affected by the consequences of conflict, climate and crisis. In August 2021, following the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, and based on our 90 years of assisting refugees find work, we responded to meet the needs of Afghans who were based in the UK. Over 250 have already benefited from our employment support and found work, a critical component to successful refugee integration in the UK. World Jewish Relief has also been responding to the food security crisis across Afghanistan over the last year, working through local partners. We're delighted to work alongside other agencies of faith and no faith in supporting Afghans in their future needs, both in the UK and in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Dear all, HIAS is honored to be among the Jewish organizations receiving the Avicenna Award for our response to the Afghanistan humanitarian crisis in 2021. When Kabul fell, we were compelled to find ways to help. In the United States, we quickly deployed staff to military bases to assist with the arrival and processing of tens of thousands of evacuees. We provided logistical support, case management, legal representation, mental health counseling, and other essential services well into 2022. On a global level, HIAS teams across the globe work to coordinate efforts and to provide assistance and also provide guidance to other organizations involved in evacuation efforts on international protection systems and mechanisms. HIAS supporters also immediately reached out and offered their support. Across our refugee resettlement network and through a novel private sponsorship program with Jewish and interfaith community groups, we helped thousands of Afghans to reach safety and restart their lives in Europe and the United States. Today, we continue to advocate for the legal rights of those evacuated. Thank you again for this recognition. Huge congratulations to the other honorees. We appreciate it so very much.
Hi, my name is Yotam Politzer and I'm the CEO of IsraAid, Israel's largest and leading humanitarian aid organization. We were deeply involved in the evacuation of more than 200 at-risk Afghans, including the Afghan Girls Robotics Team, the Afghan Girls Cycling Team, female judges, families of diplomats who are at risk after the Taliban took over Afghanistan. This rescue operation was very dramatic. We had to print passports for them. We had to arrange visas for them, transportation, private jets, and thank God now they're all safe in Canada, US, Albania, and a few other countries. We couldn't do it without our Afghan partners who are on the ground risking their lives together with our team.
ویدیویی را که دیدیم واقعا دردآور است و تا هنوزم بعضی اوقات خود من وقتی فکر میکنم باورم نمیشه که افغانستان رفت و همه خوابا رفت و مردم افغانستان به این حال روز رسید. ولی مهمتری است تا ریشه در آب است امید ثمره است. همی که مردم افغانستان تلاش میکنن، همی که این نشست امروز اینجا جریان داره و همه گرد هم هستند و نمیگن برای طالب و مفکوره طالب و به ضدیت با طالب استاد هستند، واقعا یک انرژی مثبت است و ما درک میکنیم که این تاریکی به زودی تبدیل به روشنی میشه و مردم افغانستان دوباره به امو خوابا و امیدهای خود خواد رسید و آنچنان که مرادیان صاحب گفت امید داریم که روزی نشست دوباره در کابل برگزار بکنیم و ما گرد هم باشیم و دوستایی که چندین سال بیرون از افغانستان بودن امیدوار است اون روز بر بگردن در افغانستان و در کنار هم این خوشی را تجلیل بکنیم. و حال میرسیم به اون بخش بسیار مهم برنامه خود که دقیقاً توضیح همون آوارد است برای کسایی که برنده شدن. And it's time to present the award to this year Avicenna Award winner. I'm kindly requesting from Madam Fawzia Koofi, Ambassador Jawad, Mr. Gareth Wardell and Dr. Muradian to present the awards for the winners. And the winners are World Jewish Relief, Paul Anticoni, CEO of the World Jewish Relief, to receive the award. Rabbi David Mason, Executive Director of HIAS+JCORE, to receive the award. And Yotam Politzer, CEO of the IsraAid, to receive the awards. Next question. و خانم کوفی award تقدیم میکنن and this award is from the Ruby and Madam Koofi is from Badakhshan as well and it's originally come from Badakhshan and it's a honor for all of us.
Double importance for me because also it comes from my province.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Please. Thank you everyone and congratulations for all of you for the winners, and it's an honor for me as well to be with all of you, and I think if you have any space, the stage is yours. You can have a little chatting here if you want, please.
Good evening everyone. It's a big honor for me to be here on behalf of IsraAid. IsraAid is the leading humanitarian aid organization out of Israel. I flew in this morning from Tel Aviv. It's very special to be here receiving this award from an Afghan organization in a church as an organization that is inspired by Jewish values. I want to start by thanking a few special people who are in the room who actually played a major role in this evacuation, which is could put actually James Bond to shame. So first I want to thank the Kirsch family who are here with us, who actually supported this operation both financially, they supported it financially and helped us cover the cost of the planes and the evacuation, but even more importantly, when there wasn't a country who was willing to take some of the Afghans that we evacuated, Wendy from the Kirsch family actually called the Prime Minister of Albania, and he immediately said yes. The other person who was sharing with us about the history of the Jews in Afghanistan, but actually he is a hero himself and saved hundreds of lives of Afghan at risk, is Ambassador Jawad. Where is Ambassador Jawad? So, I'm not sure, I'm sure the Jewish people here in the room are familiar with the story of the Japanese consul who in World War II, Sugihara, risked his life and printed thousands of visas for Jews who were fleeing for their life from Europe. We called Ambassador Jawad the Afghan Sugihara. Because when we had hundreds of border, and I was there with my team members on the border between Afghanistan and Tajikistan, right after the Taliban took over, we found out that many of them didn't have passports. Ambassador Jawad, together with his team in Moscow, took a big risk and worked day and night to print passports, send them to us, to Tajikistan. We got these passports across the border, and thanks to these passports, many of these people were able to travel and reach their final destination, which was Canada, France, US, and many other countries. So Ambassador Jawad, this award is also for you. Thank you. And again, I know that it's been a long evening, and if I will tell the whole story, it will take hours. But I would just share one concept that, for me, is the essence of this evening and our work. This is the concept of post-traumatic growth. How a terrible trauma, tragedy, disaster, like what happened in Afghanistan, could also turn into an opportunity not only to save lives, which is what we and my colleagues and my friends here were doing, but also an opportunity to build bridges between people. And how a terrible trauma that we wish would never happen really changed people's perspective. And I think this evening is a beautiful example of it. And I will share with you that now, these 205 Afghans that we evacuated from Afghanistan, every Friday, just before the Jewish Shabbat, they are all texting me, Shabbat Shalom. So this is the example of post-traumatic growth. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you for this great honor. Toda, and thank you.
So there is a Jewish saying that when you have two Jews, you have three opinions. And I remember watching a program about the last Jews of Kabul, how there were two Jews who were both celebrating the Jewish festival of Hanukkah in different parts of the synagogue. They had an argument with each other about how you should light the candles. Two Jews, the last two Jews, three opinions. But how wonderful is it sitting here in this church together with people of different religions, sitting together in harmony, in love. How wonderful is that? It really is inspiring. And I'd so much therefore like to thank AISS for a wonderful, wonderful evening of bringing us together and bringing us together in love. It's an honor to be here. It's humbling to be here, both with all of you, with other Jewish organizations who do so much, brothers and sisters of mine who do so much incredible work at the moment. So I'm David Mason. I've been a rabbi for a number of years, but I'm now the executive director of HIAS+JCORE here in London. And I'm honored to be here representing HIAS and the immense work that HIAS has done to facilitate, to support the resettlement of thousands of Afghans since, of course, the fall of Kabul on that most traumatic and difficult day. I'm here with my Deputy Director, Amos Schoenfield, who's over there, who's going to wave right now. That's it, Amos. My chair, Adam Rose, is behind. I think there I can see you, Adam. And the General Counsel of HIAS is over here from the United States. It's so good to be with you, Mark Cohen, who's here over there standing. And at the bottom of all this are values. I think we had that mentioned before. I heard Paul mention it, of course, in the video. The importance of Jewish values of welcoming, of justice, of empathy, of partnership, of courage, and of resilience. They are values of HIAS, but they're also Jewish values. A Judaism that doesn't stay inside and only care about itself and its people. A Judaism that looks outside as well and cares about others. And so when Kabul fell, these values were put into practice by HIAS in an incredibly deep way, with organizational support and advice, frontline support for resettlement of Afghans, deployment of staff to places of need as well. And this impacted on thousands of people. And this all makes me so proud to be Jewish today. This is a Judaism that feels a deep sense of responsibility. And I'll end with a metaphor that is a Jewish metaphor, but I've heard it in other religions as well. A boat, the boat. And imagine people on a boat, and imagine when one individual on that boat starts boring a hole underneath their seat. And everyone says to them, "You're bringing the boat down." And they say, "No, that's my seat. On my seat, I can do what I want." And from that, we generate in Judaism the concept of arvut. Arvut means that we are all guarantors for the other. We are all responsible for the other. That's such an important value for all of us. That's why we are all here. And I'm so proud, again, to be Jewish at this moment with all of you. A deep thanks from our organization, from HIAS and HIAS+JCORE for this award. And to be standing here with Paul and Yotam is really also an honor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of, my name is Paul Anticoni, the Chief Executive of World Jewish Relief. I was really pleased the sound worked on my voice on the film. I wanted to thank everybody here, particularly AISS, for this extraordinary award to IsraAid, HIAS, the Jewish Federation, and World Jewish Relief. World Jewish Relief is not used to celebrating awards. We're much more comfortable delivering services than we are being thanked. This remarkable charity was born out of a desire in the 1930s to save Jews from Nazi Europe. Between 1933 and 1946, we brought 65,000 Jews to the UK. Even then, we helped them find a home, find education, find employment, even find a partner, and they've become pillars of British society in the UK. But World Jewish Relief doesn't look back and celebrate those that we saved. We look back with regret that we didn't do more to save more of the 6 million that sadly died that we heard earlier. And in some ways, it drives World Jewish Relief today to ensure that in our work, we never want to look back and wish we'd done more. I'm very proud, with many of my World Jewish Relief colleagues here today, that not only were we able to provide immediate support to Afghans coming to the UK and longer-term support in helping them find work, we have one of our clients with us here today, but also working with our partners, the International Blue Crescent and the Afghan Red Crescent, in Afghanistan, delivering food and emergency supplies up to 17,000 people in very, very difficult conditions. But it's clear that the situation in Afghanistan today remains absolutely desperate. The enormous gulf between those that need support and the support that's being provided. In a world where memories are short and attention span is brief, and people move on to the next emergency of the day. For those fleeing from Afghanistan and other places, we know that in the absence of safe and legal routes, people face unbelievable risk. The sinking of the boat in Greece last week, just indicative of it. And in the UK, as we've heard, almost two years after Afghans arrived, we still have 8,000 Afghans in hotel accommodation, uncertain about their final destination. This is absolutely unacceptable. World Jewish Relief remains committed to assisting Afghans in this country in their journey into employment, because employment and language is such a critical part of settling and finding safe sanctuary. Afghans' history has demonstrated an amazing resilience and pride as a people, and I'm greatly inspired by grassroots Afghan initiatives and organisations, including AISS, working hard to forge a better future for their people despite immense challenges. On behalf of World Jewish Relief and all our partner organisations, thank you so much for this extraordinary award. Good evening.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here this evening with all of you, and I want to reiterate congratulations to the winners of the Avicenna Award, and on behalf of the Jewish community to say thank you so much to AISS for your hospitality.
And thank you again for allowing us in this beautiful event. Please enjoy the Sufi music with Dr. Payman Haidarian and Dr. Sulaiman Haqpana, and with the dance of Dr. Tabrizi and the dinner afterward. Thank you so much. سپاسگزار هستم از همه شما. امیدوار هستم که خوب و خوش گذشته باشه و با امید دیدار شما به زودی. شب خوش داشته باشید. سپاسگزار. Thank you so much.